look at a gun now, I mean, it's simple. I guess it's just, what are my options of what I have? I mean, a budget could be a constraint, but then what are the best options off budget? But if budget is an issue for me, what are these different things that I would want?
Yeah.
And, and some of it,
priorities, right? What would be priority and what would be like,
right. And there's pros and cons, like I said, of all of these. And, I wouldn't go by, I mean, there's people give out guidance to get you on the yellow brick road, on the right path of righteousness, on having a good gun setup. So it's like, what are products that are reliable, are durable, are going to last, and not break or have shifts off my zero or create parallax shifts as well, depending on how I'm looking at it through that optic. And then what's helps me out on speed, what doesn't help me out on speed, what helps me out on being more accountable for a precision-based shot and things like that. So then that just comes with also just applying it and then getting used to that tool. So it's not like a one-all be-all, I wouldn't say that. But I think it's just like you as an individual too. I mean, go out there and try some products and see what fits best for you, but then start out with knowing what are the good quality products to start out with, or you can jump to it. And then, honestly, and then the thing is too, is just, coming from the military and then even guys in law enforcement, we can talk about all these options and varieties, but sometimes at the end of the day, you're stuck with what you're issued, and you just have to learn how to work with what you got and do it well.
And you brought, and that's something you brought up interesting, and again, like we've talked again in the past, and you just brought it up here, is that, and that was the cool thing, is when you as you guys rotated in and out, your team with other teams would just share data, lessons learned, and you guys would implement. I mean, that's amazing, right? And we want to do the same thing too when we get end user feedback when it comes to the rifles. We want that end user feedback on certain products that work or they don't work or they didn't like or they end up helping them. Because just like I said, you can talk about some instances where the rooms are small and there's furniture in there. You got to maneuver around that, and you can. I mean, I'm sure you've had the experience the same as me. You kick in a door and that room is super tiny. I mean, it's just. Or it could be overwhelmingly big. You get there's courtyards to deal with too, like as far as certain facilities might have a courthouse, or even movement to the place could be farther distance. So so knowing your holds from being in a room that's that we're in now from 15 feet away to where moving up to a house or in a, some of the courtyard there's like 25 or 20 yards to know all your holds rapidly in that sense.
No, and the thing is too is when I talk about your operating environment, I mean, your gun setup is kind of tailored to that, in terms of what you, once you can identify that. So, guys that, in Afghanistan, I mean, yes, there are people that run SBRs and stuff, but, a lot of that, it went from 16-inch guns to SBRs, and yes, they're still there for certain things and reasons, and then it kind of like crept back to 16-inch guns again, and then you got a suppressor on that, so that additional added length. And the reasons why you wanted that is because guys were in extended range engagements a lot. So then it's like, okay, I can train on this weapon system setup, even though it's set up for kind of more extended range engagement, but I can learn how to set it up with the appropriate optics or equipment that I can still operate the same setup within close quarters, and then I just have to learn how to manipulate it and stuff, and so that's a little bit different, because I mean, if you look at, again, what's your job? I mean, we're talking about military guys, like in that sense, I mean, they have to control the entire environment and work that entire environment no matter where it's at and stuff. I mean, SWAT team guys, in LE, I've had a lot of conversations with them over the years when I had done full SWAT weeks with SWAT teams in various locations in the United States and stuff. And, and I'll ask them about their gun setups, and, kind of sometimes guys get a little locked in their bubble, and they're not thinking of the contingency aspect of stuff. And so it's just like your marksmanship program, for example. Okay, I see your setup here. All right, you guys aren't running any kind of magnification. Well, do you guys work and practice, from 100, 150 to 200 to 300 yard shots and such? And then it's like, no, because our streets are only like 50 yards. And it's like, okay, well, if you look down along linear line of the street, it can stretch out to that distance, and if that is the critical time that you have the opportunity to take that shot, you have to accomplish that shot. So you need to learn to work your tools and stuff.
And what if we respond to a shopping center? Right, where it's, gauge could be long. And that's one thing too, guys, as far as like, and I know we're referencing SWAT because it's kind of more recognized what's associated with CQB, but CQB it's when it comes to law enforcement and even to civilian homeowners, stuff like that, like in your house. it's
Yeah,
close quarters.
absolutely.
Close quarters in your house. Narcs, making entries, narcotics use, close quarters. And people forget schools. Working inside schools for SROs, that's close quarters.
It's close quarters,
It
or
is.
if you guys got there's like TAC teams that do low visibility stuff. I mean, the ability to place a better, higher, or more firepower in a concealment bag, and then also carry more rounds. I mean, that's a big thing too. So there's a lot of things that people are looking at and experimenting with. And again, it's like, I know, like when law enforcement does come and they're like, hey, we want to focus on a shorter barrel gun. They already have the idea of like what their goal is that they're trying to accomplish, to include what their operating environment is. And then you're just like, okay, cool. So now once I understand that, yes, you are looking for this for concealment purposes or maneuverability purposes to help you out on speed. You want to press up closer on that door without breaking that threshold versus being offset so much because I got a longer barrel. Or, hey, I know my target areas are just kind of complicated and confined, and there's a lot of furniture. We want guns that we can maneuver and manipulate very quickly and rapidly, and not have to retract back and go forward and things like that. Then it's like, okay, cool, we can guide you to this. Now let's look at the accessories of what you're looking for. And and then setting the gun up so then it's comfortable. It can operate. I mean, I personally set my guns up where they're ambidextrous for shooting platform,
for operating controls and everything.
Exactly,
else like that too,
and so I've seen
confined spaces.
And I've seen some guys like SBRs or short barrels. I mean, I know you kind of get into limit, less rail space, to set things up, but then they'll have some crazy things that are set up, and it's just like, okay, why do you have your tack light that you have? I mean, when it's like really crappy and puts out like 50 looms, which I don't understand why you'd want that. But then like, why are you putting on an accessory that makes it stick way out? Because now it's like breaking your support hand grip and stuff. And then also too, on maneuvering around, you don't want things coming out all over the place, that if you're going in confined spaces and stuff, that something can catch on your weapon and impede you from employing it if you needed to on that. And so, we kind of learned that a little bit like overseas, just because we would come in rooms. I mean, you would have wires hanging down in doorways. I mean, guys' night vision would get caught, if they were flipped up or whatnot, or guys' guns would get caught if they had like big things, or they weren't paying attention to what an extended barrel would be with a suppressor or a can on the end, and then catching on stuff. So, these are all just these little critical points. And so it's like, when I look at it, I don't look at it, I look at it not just to make it look sexy, but then does it match and cover the principle, and stuff. And then is it and I look at things, as well as like, is it assisting me or is it impeding me? If it's impeding me on meeting these various contingencies, either I have to learn how to work around it, and minimize and reduce that as much as possible, or I may just make a whole setup difference, altogether. Yeah.
It's pretty interesting because, like I said, just like you said, if it's light sticking up, if you're, practicing the transition, and if you don't right off the bat feel comfortable with your grip and you're constantly trying to adjust it, then that, to me, that's a sign, to change something up.
Right.
And also, you brought up that other interesting point, like the amount of gears that some SWAT teams have to wear. I mean, take that in consideration. One person wearing all that stuff, going into a doorway with a weapon, or going through different doorways, you're right. I mean, a shorter gun's going to come into play because less to go with. But in other situations, say like an SRO who's could possibly have a short rifle in concealment, is not going to be wearing all that stuff right off the bat. So it's all like, it's so interesting because like all that stuff come into play, that whole fluid of motion and of maneuvering your rifle, being comfortable with it, because if you have to take that shot, it better land where it needs to land.
Right.
100%.
Right. Exactly. And so like the SBR stuff, I mean, like I said, if you just think about like your house or your room setup or buildings that you go to, and if you're thinking about the concept of clearing a room and securing that room, like what tools do I have that can help me manipulate around things like desks and stuff, and even thresholds, like clearing this threshold before you dedicate yourself into that room. If it's a center fed room, what's your two biggest threats after I've cleared that threshold? And I see nothing in my general 10 to 2 as I'm going through before I dedicate myself, and I haven't broken past that threshold yet. What are my two big vulnerable points? Well, the cuts, the opposing ends on like a center fed. And so it's just kind of like having a longer barrel gun, and especially if you have a can on it, it's going to push you back further. It's going to reduce just a little bit, how much more of that angle that you can see within that room. But then also too, once you break past that threshold, and then you're presenting your weapon system towards your point of domination to that cut, especially if you're number 1 or 2 man, then having a longer gun is going to give that exposure before you can fully come in and visually see and control what that point of domination is or what is in that cut area right there. So that's just an example, just kind of talk about that as to why. Additionally too, it's like I think especially like TAC teams, and we'll be going back and forth, TAC teams, civilians, and all that. So just bear with us on this and just kind of understand how we look at things.
Because it applies to both. You're in your home and you
same thing.
I would choose a shorter rifle for home defense. Because
exactly.
like I said, you're going to know your own layout of your own home,
right?
Apartment, wherever you live at, it's just like I said, you're going to know that, and I feel like that would come into play better having a short rifle.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. And so. But like the thing is too, like on the TAC teams, like if everybody's got longer guns, generally your stack starts like spreading out a little bit because nobody wants to flag each other for safety and stuff. And it's a principle on during training and then real world application that we should be utilizing and enforcing at all points of time. But then that naturally happens, and then but then it goes again too. Then it's like, okay, well then you need to learn how to train on how to manipulate that gun where that isn't an issue. So there are various factors, but. But like like you said, the civilian and home defense, I want a weapon system that is maneuverable, it's light, it's well balanced and stuff, and I can easily manipulate it in confined space and stuff or around certain obstacles in my house. So that's going to help me out on my speed. And then how does speed go into real world application? Well, speed is a principle of CQB, but then how does speed work to your advantage? If I can't manage my gun fast and efficiently, that's not enforcing that principle, and that could potentially cost me or hurt me. And I don't know that, at that point, just because it's not saying that, because you're not rocking this, that something happens, God forbid, and then you have to utilize something to defend yourself, that you're going to get hit because you don't have that. And it's not the case at all. But, again, we just start looking at everything and just slicing that pie, slicing that pie, and slicing that pie, and nitpicking every little thing, and why I have just kind of like when we talked about the NVGs in the last video we got for that, there's a reason and a why everything is in a certain location on my gun, and then it's just you as the end user being able to understand that and set things up, but then having the practical time to train on that and stuff, and then going to training or attending training where then you can take the tools and the accessories that you picked, and now you combine it with capability, and then you are more efficient and confident as an individual when having to manage these things, especially under stress, and then, but yeah, it's just like home defense, or those kind of environments, or working, bringing a gun as a concealment factor because I'm just trying to bring a better tool for protection versus a pistol because my environment, requires that or something, or I'm thinking it requires that. So, on a gun here, different lengths. What's that? Yeah. It's a gun that's, like I said, it's light, it's well balanced, even with accessories on there. And then especially the energy distribution going through the weapon system. If I'm having to rapidly fire that gun, is it bouncing all over the place? And I've shot some pretty poorly designed carbines, and I'll just say it's kind of like, your buddy that's in the garage building a gun, and he's just doing you a favor, and it's cool to watch your buddy do something like that. But then, is he understanding tolerance levels, and then
gas flow,
soft balance? Yeah, so that kind of the ergonomics of the weapon as it's firing and energy distribution. And so, we were talking about one company yesterday that they make a really good carbine. And the gun would never rise, but then the problem is like all that energy was coming to this back of this buttstock, and it was a really sharp hit every single time. And as I was firing, it was like my center of attention was coming to that. And then it was like, I was losing focus a little bit on my environment and then focusing on something that I should have been focusing on. So those are things too. And then that recoil management, does it rise a lot? Is it run low? Yeah, every gun's got a little bit of a push here, but is it too much? Where then I could potentially miss my shot, or especially if I had say multiple threats,
what
or
distance,
whatever the case
right?
was. Yeah,
what distance? Like there's multiple rapid shots within like 15 yards. Am I going to miss? Probably not. But are they going to be centralized in a location? Because just like I said, you've always taught critical precision. You want them to land in the general same area first round.
Yeah.